the British producers say, let's let the three black dudes do some breakdance.
Hollywood has always had a dirty little secret, and it's not about who's sleeping with who or who got fired from what. It's about the paycheck, specifically the one that your co-star was cashing while you were busy carrying half the show for a fraction of the money. Because behind the laugh tracks and the matching wardrobe budgets, some of television's most beloved sitcom stars were quietly getting shortchanged in ways that would make your jaw hit the floor. Today we're pulling back the curtain on 12 sitcom stars who were secretly paid half of what their co-stars were making. Number 12, Tina Yothers, Family Ties. Family Ties ran from 1982 to 1989 on NBC and was one of the cornerstone sitcoms of the entire decade. You had Michael J. Fox as the fast-talking, Reagan-loving Alex Keaton. You had Meredith Baxter Birney and Michael Gross as the lovably out-of-touch liberal parents. And then you had Jennifer Keaton, the youngest daughter, played by Tina Yothers. Jennifer was sharp, funny, and grounded. She was the kid who felt like an actual kid instead of a sitcom prop. Here's the problem. While Michael J. Fox was becoming one of the biggest TV stars on the planet, Yothers was still being paid like a supporting player on a show that hadn't yet found its audience. By the time Family Ties hit its peak, Fox's salary had climbed significantly, and the gap between what he was earning and what his co-stars were taking home had grown into something nobody really wanted to talk about openly. Now, to be fair, Fox was the breakout. Networks have always paid their breakout stars more, sometimes much more, than the people standing next to them. That logic made sense to the suits on the business side. But when you watch a Family Ties episode and you see Yothers holding her own in scene after scene, delivering real laughs and genuine heart, the pay disparity feels pretty hard to justify. Yothers has spoken candidly over the years about the financial realities of being a kid actor on a hit show. The money was not what people assumed it was. She stepped back from acting after the show ended, eventually moving to Canada, getting into music, and building a completely different life. She returned for the Family Ties reunion that aired in 2012 and looked genuinely happy. But the paycheck she was cashing in, 1987, that's a whole different conversation. Number 11, Todd Bridges' Different Strokes. Different Strokes is one of those shows that people remember with a complicated mix of nostalgia and sadness. It ran from 1978 to 1986 and gave us Gary Coleman's Arnold Jackson, one of the most recognizable child characters in television history. What you talking about? Willis became more than a catchphrase. It became a cultural shorthand for an entire era of television. But here's the thing. Willis wasn't just a setup for Arnold's punchlines. Todd Bridges played Willis Jackson with real depth. He was the protective older brother, the grounded one, the kid who actually looked like he was processing what it meant to go from Harlem to a Park Avenue penthouse. Willis was essential to the show's emotional core. And yet, when it came to salary, the gap between Bridges and Coleman was significant. Coleman was the breakout. He was the one on the lunchboxes and the billboard ads. The network knew what they had with Gary Coleman, and they paid accordingly. Bridges, despite being just as central to the show's premise, was in a very different financial position. Bridges has been open about this over the years. He's talked about the financial pressures he faced during and after the show, and about how the business side of Different Strokes was a lot less wholesome than the family-friendly image the show projected every week. The fact that 3 of the show's main child cast members, Bridges, Coleman, and Dana Plato, all faced serious personal struggles after the show ended, tells you something about what happens when young actors are put at the center of a multi-million-dollar machine without the proper financial and personal support around them. The "what you talking about" could just as easily have been directed at the network accountants. Number 10, Kim Fields' The Facts of Life. The Facts of Life ran for 9 seasons from 1979 to 1988. 9 seasons. That is a long time to spend at the Eastland School. Long enough for the cast to grow up on screen, long enough for the storylines to get increasingly creative, and long enough for some serious financial imbalances to us quietly take root behind the scenes without anyone making too much noise about it. Kim Fields played Tootie Ramsey from the very beginning, roller skating her way into America's living rooms as one of the sharpest and most lovable kids on the whole show. She had timing, she had charm, She had the kind of natural screen presence that casting directors spend years searching for and occasionally stumble onto by accident. By the time The Facts of Life hit its stride in the early 1980s, Fields was a bona fide fan favorite. And everyone knew it. Everyone is apparently except the people writing the checks. The salary structure on The Facts of Life reflected the same pattern you saw across almost every ensemble sitcom of that era. There was a pecking order, and it did not always correspond to who was actually making the show work week after week. Charlotte Rae, who played house mother Edna Garrett, was the adult anchor of the series and was compensated accordingly. That part made sense. But among the younger cast, the financial gaps were real, and they were noticeable. Fields, despite her popularity and her undeniable talent, was not seeing the kind of paychecks that her cultural impact might have suggested. And here is what makes this particular story hit differently from some of the others on this list. It is what came after. Fields went on to direct, produce, and build a career behind the camera that has genuinely outlasted almost everyone else from that cast. She directed episodes of Girlfriends, Tyler Perry's House of Pain, and a long list of other projects spanning decades. She didn't wait for the industry to decide she was worth more. She went out and built her own seat at the table on her own terms. In a business that has a long and well-documented history of underpaying the people it can't actually afford to lose, Kim Fields basically wrote her own ending, which honestly feels like the most Tootie thing she could have possibly done. Number 9. Keisha Knight, Pulliam, The Cosby Show. The Cosby Show was the #1 show in America for 5 consecutive seasons. 5. From 1984 to 1989, nothing touched it. Not Miami Vice, not Family Ties, not anything. It was a cultural institution, a Thursday night ritual, and a showcase for some of the most genuinely talented performers working in television at that time. America did not just watch the Huxtables. America wanted to be invited over for dinner, and at the center of a lot of that warmth was the youngest Huxtable, Rudy, Keisha Knight. Pulliam was magic from the first episode. Not promising, not charming for a kid her age, actually magic. She could share a scene with Bill Cosby, one of the most experienced comedic performers on the planet, and hold her own without breaking a sweat. The show knew what it had. The audiences knew what they had. The ratings reflected what they had. And yet, knowing something and compensating it appropriately have always been two very different conversations in Hollywood. Here is where the story gets complicated. Pulliam was a child actor, which meant the financial structures around her contract looked completely different from what the adult cast members were negotiating. Bill Cosby was not just the star of the show, he was also a producer, which meant his financial relationship with the series operated on an entirely different level from everyone else in the cast. The adult supporting players were negotiating in one universe. The child actors were operating in another one altogether. And that universe was considerably smaller. This was not unique to The Cosby Show. The television industry in the 1980s had a well-established pattern of treating child performers as interchangeable assets rather than essential contributors, regardless of what those kids were actually doing on screen every week. Rudy Huxtable was carrying scenes. She was generating some of the show's biggest audience reactions, and the check she was cashing reflected none of that reality. Pulliam has carried herself with real grace in interviews over the years when this topic comes up. She has spoken warmly about her time on the show and built a genuinely solid career afterward, including her long run on Tyler Perry's House of Pain. But when you look at the financial windfall The Cosby Show generated across its run, and then consider what the youngest cast members were actually taking home, the math lands somewhere between uncomfortable and indefensible. Number 8. Tempest Bledsoe, The Cosby Show. While we're in the Huxtable brownstone, let's stay there for one more entry, because Vanessa Huxtable has a story worth telling too. Tempest Bledsoe played Vanessa, the middle child, which might be the most thankless position in any family, fictional or otherwise. Middle child on the most successful sitcom in America. You'd think that would translate to some serious financial security, and to a degree it did. But the gap between what Bledsoe was earning and what the show's top earners were taking home was significant enough to notice. Bledsoe joined the show as a young teenager and aged through it, which meant her contract was negotiated at a time when her leverage was minimal and renegotiated as the show went on. But the fundamental structure of The Cosby Show's pay hierarchy, with Cosby himself at the top, and everyone else arranged in descending order below him meant that the middle kids were always going to be in a financially awkward spot. What's interesting about Bledsoe is how candid she eventually became about the business realities of that show. In various interviews over the years, she's talked about the financial education she got, or didn't get, during her time on the Cosby Show, and how the money wasn't always what people assumed it was for a cast member on the biggest show in the country. She later found work on Guys with Kids and maintained a steady presence in television, but her trajectory after the Cosby Show was never quite the rocket ship it probably should have been for someone who spent a decade on a #1 show. Number 7. David Faustino, Married with Children. Married with Children premiered in 1987 on a brand new network called Fox and basically dared America to be offended. Al Bundy hated his life. Peg didn't cook. Kelly wasn't exactly reading Tolstoy, and Bud Bundy, played by David Faustino, was the overlooked kid brother trying to navigate high school while his entire family operated as a masterclass in dysfunction. Faustino was genuinely funny on that show. His comedic timing was sharp, his chemistry with the rest of the cast was real, and Bud evolved over the show's 11 seasons in ways that actually made him a more interesting character than he had any right to be given the material. But the pay structure on Married with Children reflected a very clear priority system. Ed O'Neill was the star, full stop. His salary reflected that. Katie Sagal, who played Peg, was negotiating from a position of increasing strength as the show became a phenomenon. Christina Applegate, who played Kelly, was becoming a breakout star, and her paycheck was starting to move accordingly, and Faustino was somewhere further down the list. Now, Faustino has talked about this in interviews with a level of humor that feels very on brand for someone who spent his formative years on a show about a shoe salesman who hated everyone. He's made peace with it. He pursued music as D-Lil, kept working in television, and has been a regular presence at Married with Children, reunion events where everyone seems to genuinely like each other. But for 11 seasons of solid work on one of Fox's biggest shows, the financial rewards were not evenly distributed. Number 6. Alfonso Ribeiro, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air ran from 1990 to 1996 and turned Will Smith from a rapper with a hit single into one of the most bankable stars on the planet, which is great. Good for Will Smith. The man worked for it, and the show was built around him. But here's what sometimes gets lost in the Fresh Prince conversation. Alfonso Ribeiro was extraordinary on that show. Carlton Banks was not just a supporting character. He was a comedic creation on the level of some of the best ensemble characters in sitcom history. The Carlton Dance, the Tom Jones obsession, the neurotic Ivy League energy bumping up against Will's street-smart swagger. That dynamic was the engine of the show, just as much as anything Will Smith was doing in the lead role, and Ribeiro knew it. His value to the show was clear to anyone watching, but the salary structure on Fresh Prince put Will Smith in a completely different financial category from everyone else on the cast. Smith was not just the star, he was the reason the show existed. The network built the entire premise around him, so his contract reflected that reality in a pretty dramatic way. By the time Fresh Prince was in its later seasons, the gap between what Smith was earning and what Ribeiro was taking home had become one of those open secrets in the industry. Ribeiro has spoken about it in measured terms, acknowledging the reality of how shows work without turning it into a grievance. He's been enormously successful since, most notably as the host of America's Funniest Home Videos, a gig he's held since 2015 and clearly loves. But if you want a textbook example of a supporting player worth more than their contract suggested, Carlton Banks is your case study. Number 5. Lisa Bonet, The Cosby Show. Yes, we're back in the Huxtable brownstone one more time. Because Lisa Bonet's financial story is different from the other Cosby Show entries on this list, and it's worth telling on its own terms. Bonet played Denise Huxtable, and from almost the first episode, she was the cool one, the effortlessly magnetic one, the one that teenage viewers wanted to be, and teenage boys wanted to, well, you know. Denise had an authenticity that felt different from the rest of the Huxtable kids. Bonet brought something genuinely offbeat to the role, and audiences responded. But Bonet's relationship with the show was always complicated. She took time off to film Angel Heart in 1987, a move that created friction with the production. She was eventually spun off into her own series, A Different World, which premiered in 1987 and was a hit in its own right, though Bonet left that show after just one season as well. She returned to The Cosby Show for later seasons in a reduced capacity. Throughout all of this, her financial positioning relative to the show's top earners remained what you might politely call modest. The behind-the-scenes tension with the production had real consequences for her leverage in contract negotiations. When your relationship with the showrunner is strained, you do not walk into those rooms with a lot of bargaining power. Bonet went on to build a fascinating post-television life and career. She married Lenny Kravitz, then later Jason Momoa. She took film roles on her own terms. She became one of those figures that Hollywood spent years underestimating and undercompensating, and then suddenly couldn't stop talking about. The Cosby Show paid her less than she was worth. The culture eventually corrected the record. Number 4. Jaleel White, Family Matters. Now, here is one that might genuinely surprise you, because the conventional wisdom about Family Matters is that Jaleel White, who played Steve Urkel, was the guy who took over the show, the breakout, the one whose face ended up on everything from cereal boxes to alarm clocks shaped like suspenders. If anyone on Family Matters was getting paid, it should have been Urkel, right? Well, sort of, eventually, but the timeline on that is more complicated than you'd think. White joined Family Matters in 1989 as a one-off character. Urkel was supposed to appear in a single episode, one episode, and then, somewhere between the script reading and the audience reaction, everything changed. The character exploded, letters poured in, the network scrambled to make Urkel a regular. And White, who had negotiated his contract as a guest actor rather than a series regular, found himself in the strange position of being the most popular character on his own show, while his contract still reflected his original status. It took time, real time, for his compensation to catch up to his cultural impact. And even when his salary did increase, the process of renegotiating from a position that started at guest star rates meant he was always playing catch-up relative to what his contribution to the show was actually worth. The original cast members who had been there from the beginning, the Winslow family, had contracts built on different terms entirely. White has been candid about the financial and personal difficulties he experienced during and after Family Matters. He's talked about the pressure of carrying a show as a teenager, about the ways the industry failed to protect young performers, and about the gap between what Urkel meant to pop culture and what it actually put in his bank account. He's continued acting steadily and has approached his story with a self-awareness that is genuinely admirable. But for a character that saved a show from cancellation and turned it into a phenomenon, the financial story is a lot more complicated than the catchphrase would suggest. Number 3. Christina Applegate, Married with Children. We already visited Married with Children once on this list, but Kelly Bundy's financial story is different enough from Bode's that it deserves its own entry. And honestly, it's one of the most striking examples on this entire countdown. Christina Applegate was a teenager when Married with Children premiered in 1987. She was new to the industry, relatively inexperienced in contract negotiations, and playing a character that the show initially underestimated. Kelly Bundy was supposed to be a background presence, a prop, almost, the pretty teenage daughter whose main function was to exist in the periphery of Al's misery. And then Applegate started making Kelly Bundy something genuinely funny. The commitment to the character's specific brand of cheerful dimness was a comedic performance, not just a casting decision. Kelly Bundy became beloved. She became one of the defining characters of the show and one of the defining characters of late 80s and early 90s network television. But here's the thing about being a teenage girl who becomes unexpectedly essential to a hit show. Your initial contract was not written with your future importance in mind. And renegotiating from that starting point, especially in an era when female cast members on ensemble shows were almost never the ones the studios prioritized in salary conversations, was an uphill battle. Ed O'Neill's salary as Al Bundy grew steadily throughout the show's run, in a way that reflected his status as the top-billed star. Applegate's compensation, while it improved, consistently lagged behind what her contribution to the show's success merited. She has spoken about this in interviews, carefully but clearly. The financial reality of being the breakout female star of a Fox sitcom in the late 80s was not what it should have been. Applegate went on to have one of the most impressive careers of anyone from this list. Dead to Me, Anchorman, Samantha Who. She earned Emmy nominations, critical acclaim, and box office success. She did it on her own terms. But what she built, she largely built despite what Married with Children paid her, not because of it. Number 2. Topher Grace, That 70s Show. That 70s Show premiered in 1998 and ran until 2006. It was a show with an ensemble cast that genuinely worked. Mila Kunis as Jackie, Ashton Kutcher as Kelso, Danny Masterson as Hyde, Laura Prepon as Donna, and Topher Grace as Eric Foreman, the awkward, sarcastic center of the whole operation. Now here is where the story gets interesting, because Ashton Kutcher became famous before the 70s show was finished. Punk'd launched in 2003. His film career was gaining momentum. His cultural profile was rising in a way that was visible to anyone paying attention. And studios and networks pay for cultural profile, which meant that by the show's middle and later seasons, Kutcher's salary had grown to reflect his star power outside the show. Not just his role within it, he was Kelso, yes, but he was also Ashton Kutcher, and those were two different negotiations happening at the same time. Grace, meanwhile, was anchoring the show. Eric Foreman was the lead. The entire premise ran through his perspective and his voice. Every episode began in his world. Every relationship on the show was filtered through his dynamic with the other characters. Without Eric, there is no show. That is not a controversial statement. And yet, Kutcher's outside fame had pushed his compensation into a different zip code from Grace's by the time the show was deep into its run. The guy playing the supporting friend was out-earning the guy the show was actually built around. Grace left after season 7 to pursue a film career. It's a decision that the show never really recovered from. The Randy experiment, as we've covered before, was not exactly a success, but the financial structure he was working within in those final seasons before he left was a big part of what made staying feel less appealing. When the math stops making sense, people start looking for the exit. Number 1. Shelley Long, Cheers. And here we are, the number 1 spot. And if you watched our video about stars who left hit shows, you already know that Shelley Long leaving Cheers is one of the great what were they thinking moments in television history. But what you might not know is that the pay story behind her time on that show is one of the most striking examples on this entire list. Cheers premiered in 1982 on NBC and was, by any measure, one of the best sitcoms ever made. The writing was sharp, the ensemble was extraordinary, and at its center was the will they won't they dynamic between Sam Malone, played by Ted Danson, and Diane Chambers, played by Shelley Long. That relationship was the engine of the first 5 seasons. It was what kept viewers coming back. Now, here is what you need to understand about the financial structure of Cheers in those early years. Ted Danson's deal was negotiated with his status as the show's top-billed star built in from the beginning. His salary climbed steadily and significantly as the show became a hit. By the mid-1980s, Danson was earning what would eventually become one of the most talked-about salaries in television history. The reports of what he was making per episode by the show's final seasons became genuine news items. Long's compensation, while substantial by any normal standard, was operating in a completely different universe. She was not just a supporting player, she was the co-lead. Diane Chambers was not a background character enriching someone else's story. She was half of the most important relationship on the show. And yet, the financial gap between Long and Danson was significant enough that people inside the industry were aware of it. Now, does money explain everything about why Long left after season 5? No. She has talked about wanting more time with her family, about wanting to pursue film roles, about creative restlessness. Those were real factors. But when you're doing the same job as your co-star, when your face is on the same promotional materials, and your name is in the same opening credits, and the financial recognition for that work is dramatically different from theirs, it changes how you feel about showing up to the set on a Tuesday morning. The cruel irony is what happened next. Cheers continued without Long. They brought in Kirstie Alley as Rebecca Howe, and the show kept going for 6 more seasons. It remained successful. and it remained funny. Ted Danson's salary continued to climb to the point where his reported $1 million per episode by the final season became one of the most cited figures in television salary history. And Long's film career, which was supposed to be the payoff for leaving, never quite delivered what she was hoping for. She returned for the series finale in 1993. She and Danson shared scenes again, and it was like no time had passed. The chemistry was still there, the show still worked, but the financial story of their time together on that show is a permanent reminder that, in television, doing equal work has never guaranteed equal pay. And somehow, more than 40 years after Cheers first aired, that still feels like a sentence we should not still be writing. And that's a wrap. 12 sitcom stars who were doing the work, holding the scenes together, and carrying the shows that made networks and studios an enormous amount of money, all while their co-stars were cashing significantly larger checks. Now, look, Hollywood has always had a hierarchy, and not every pay gap on this list came from malicious intent. Some of it was about star power. Some of it was about who the show was built around. Some of it was about contracts negotiated before anyone knew what the show would become. The business side of television is complicated, and it does not always reward the right people in the right proportions. But some of it was also about age, about gender, about who in the room had the leverage to push back and who didn't. And when you look at this list as a whole, a pattern emerges that is pretty hard to ignore. The good news is that most of the people on this list went on to build real careers on their own terms. They found success that had nothing to do with what some network accountant decided their worth was in 1985. And that counts for something. Which of these surprised you the most, and which ones did we miss? Drop it in the comments because we are always listening. Hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the stories behind your favorite shows. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.